Hello and welcome to another Inkarnate live stream. My name is Mati, and today we're going to be creating realistic water with a Fantasy Battlemap style. So basically this is going to be how to make realistic water on your battle maps. And specifically we're going to be covering two types of biomes that interact with water. That's going to be your beachfront or coastline and your rivers. Now, of course, if you want to see this as a series, maybe you want to know how to do realistic water to a mangrove, a swamp, a lake, etc., etc., please let us know in the chat. If you're following along in YouTube, just go ahead and put that in the comment section, okay? All right, now before we jump into this, let's just do some real quick announcements. If you head up to that notification bell, just top right corner, you'll see what's new. You click that, and we got a couple things here. One, we just released our new art Christmas special. So it's a holiday season is upon us, and hey, there's this beautiful seasonal art that you can use for maybe your Christmas one-shot, Hanukkah one-shot, whatever it is you celebrate this time of year. Maybe it's just a holiday for you to spend time with family. This is going to be the art for you to use and to just have some fun. And there's some pretty cool art. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll be able to see that we added some art to pretty much every single style. So that's very exciting. And we also have one other thing, a new sci-fi survey. So we're working on sci-fi right now, and so there's a little survey that you can take. If you just click that yellow link, it will take you to the survey. Feel free to fill out that survey so that we can get more information, because the sci-fi stuff is way overdue. We're excited and we just want some feedback before we release it to the public, right? Okay, don't ask for a release date, by the way. We don't have it, just to let you know. Okay, now let's just go ahead and jump in. Hey, Brian, super glad that you're here. So let's do some realistic water. You're going to want to clone and edit this map. You just go ahead and check the chat. It's right in there. Click that link and you can follow along. Just go ahead and open it up and get started. Now, hey, how's it going, first time chatter? Delgado the Doge, or Doggy, welcome. Glad that you are here. Now, what makes water really interesting is its relationship to land. Okay, if you just have a plain glass of water, or if you were just at a lake and there's no wind or anything like that, water is not very dynamic. It's not very interesting. You could just take a water texture and just paint it over an area. So what makes the dynamic of water really interesting is its relationship to land. So let's just go ahead and get started. Now, the first one is going to be with a coastline. And we're just going to break down just a little bit of the science, not too much. And if any of you here know more about this subject, please share in the chat. I'm very much interested in learning from everyone about this. And I am not a professional or a scientist, so I'm just going to share with you what I know. And it's the method that I use. Knowing this information is helpful when trying to portray it on an actual battle map, okay? Let's go ahead and open up the coastline here. Hopefully you've cloned and edited that map. If not, then just follow along on your own map. Let's go ahead and open up water here, or let's open up the wave diagram. Let's talk a little bit about how water operates, or how waves operate. And by understanding these kind of phases, it's easier to portray it onto the map. Let's get started here. So a little bit of terms and definitions before we start. So the top of a wave is referred to as a crest, and the difference, or the slope, or that U-shape between two crests, is what's referred to as a trough. Now, a little bit about waves and how they operate. You'll notice that there are three phases here, and technically we'll be applying 4 to the map, but these are the 3 important ones. First, you'll notice these kind of circular arrows right here. These are called water molecules, and they rotate in a circular motion as they go towards the shore. This at the bottom here is called the wave base. It's where the particles just don't have the kind of motion anymore. They've kind of just sputtered out, shall we say. All right. Now, in the first part, deep waters, the water molecules are not affected by the bottom. This is the bottom right here, okay? This is the bottom. But once, in the second phase here, once these particles come into contact with the slope of the land, they start to become elliptical, and they start pushing the wave upward into this crest right here. Okay? That's what ends up happening. And where they break is called breaking waves, and that's where they hit along the beach or wherever it might be. And when waves are going up along the shoreline, that's called the swash. Okay? When the water goes back into the ocean, that's called your backwash. Now your swash is faster. It's going to spill. Once it breaks, it's going to spill onto the shore, and then quickly and then slowly the water will recede back. That's called that backwash. Now where there is a lot of water particles and a little bit of sea foam and stuff like that along the shoreline, that's referred to as surf. Okay, and we're going to be portraying all of this. We're going to be portraying deep waters in part 1, 2, where waves begin to form and steepen as they begin to hit the shore. And then we'll also be portraying the waves breaking. We'll be portraying the swash and the surf. So as long as we know these kind of 4 things, it's a little bit easier to start putting together that when you start putting in the water. Let's go ahead and turn off the diagram, and we'll put a little guide down that will kind of help us. The first thing you have to do is decide the direction in which the waves are going to be going, okay? So you'll never have to curve a wave ever. Waves will never curve like around. What's going to happen instead is they're going to be straight lines that go in. So you have to decide really the direction that you want the waves to be, okay? So if I decide, well, I want the waves to go inward, kind of like this. Now you know which direction it's going in. Just make sure that when you place all the waves down, that they're all facing in the same direction as they come into contact with the shoreline. Let's just go ahead and set up a little bit of a guide, because a guide is going to be really helpful when you're trying to figure out, well, where are all these zones, right? So let's go ahead and turn on the guide. So that first guide is going to be your deeper waters. That's going to be the furthest away from the shoreline. Your breaking waves, you can consider a middle section, and then we're going to be making the surf. Okay, so I'm going to start with the deep waters and then moving inward closer we get to land. All right, let's go ahead and turn that guide off, and we'll go ahead and get started with the first one. Now, if you're wondering, this land isn't made with clipping masks, but for yourself, when you're making it, you're probably going to want to use the add mode of the mask tool. But the reason why I use clipping masks is because I can move the shoreline. I can rotate the whole thing. So clipping masks can be very, very helpful if you're maybe not satisfied with the position of the land against the coastline. If they're all clipping masks and you group it, you can rotate that whole thing as you see fit. So clipping masks are very useful. Let's go ahead and jump right into the water section. Ooh, awesome. All right, so water, here we go. So first, let's start, remember our deeper water? Let's go ahead and turn that on real quick and you can kind of see what it looks like. Now what I've done is I've just used these waves from Fantasy Regional. You can use whichever wave you want, but I've made these waves to where they're kind of lower opacity. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I don't want to show a lot of contrast between the wave and the ocean, because these are out in the deep part of the ocean. The trough is not quite as deep, or the crests are not quite as high, unless there's like a storm or something like that. But let's just assume that the waters are fairly calm in the deeper part. I'm trying to put more emphasis on the breaking waves than I am on the deeper part. So by putting less emphasis on the deeper waves, or the waves in the deeper part of the ocean, or further out from the ocean, I'm putting more emphasis on the break. Because to me, that's the most iconic part of a beach, right? When I go to a beach head or wherever, I like to see the waves crash in the breaking zone so that I can see the foam and the wash come up on the shore and then recede back with the backwash. That's really fun to watch. So we're going to try to put emphasis on that part and not on the deeper part, but you can add as much detail as you want. It's up to you. I'm just going to cover the basics. Next comes the breaking waves part. The breaking waves. And the way that I've really done the breaking waves is that I've used the same waves that I've used, the Fantasy Regional waves, but I've also used some other stamps like the Fantasy Regional Mist, Seafoam stamps, and I've also used a dark blue path, and I've put it underneath the lip of the wave, underneath the crest. And the reason why is to show height. Notice how these waves here don't have any path beneath the crest. It's because it's because those troughs or those crests aren't really that high up, right? So there's no need to use contrast to show depth. But once you get into those breaker waves, as they begin to climb up and then curl and crash, I like to show height. So you'll notice these blue paths right here underneath. I'm using that blue path, dark blue color, and then blurring it, and then just putting it underneath that wave to the south or below the wave. I'm not putting it on this side of the wave. I'm putting it on the bottom side of the wave, because that way I'm trying to show some height. Because when the wave begins to curl, as it begins to come up, because those water particles are rotating and become elliptical, raising the water up, you want to show some height. That's what those paths are for. And I've also used mist to show some of the sea foam that's attached to the top of the crest of the wave. So just throwing down some mist, and we'll also be doing some painting as well. Okay, so that's how you get that. Now the next part is what's called the swash or backwash. And the way that I've done this is the same concept. I've taken waves, but this time what I've done is set those waves to the overlay blend mode, so that way they're a little bit lighter, because that kind of represents the sea foam that's carried at the very front of the swash as it comes up, okay? And I've only done 2 of them, but you can have as much of those little waves as you want. I put a couple in there to represent both swash and the backwash, but it's up to you how you want to go about doing it, okay? Next comes that surf, right? And the surf is going to be where the waves are a little bit closer onto the land, and we're going to put some sea foam there as well, and we're going to do some texturing, and the texturing is going to be my favorite part, and I'll show you how to go about doing that. Let me go ahead and just get out of all of these. Let's go ahead and pull out some textures here. So here's the first part. The first part is blending the difference between the land and the water, okay? You notice here that you'll see that there's this kind of hard edge right here. We don't want that hard edge, right? We want to blend the land and the water for a smooth transition. So the way that we do that is we just use the 2 textures that we used. One texture that you used for the land or the sand dune texture, and that water texture that I used. So remember, this is made with a clipping mask, the land part, so it has to be set to the FG layer. If I wanted to paint the BG layer, where the blue is, I'd have to set to the BG layer, okay? Let's go ahead and use the sand, and what I want to do is break up. This is all about what's called making a transition or blending 2 textures together, and it's not complex. Whenever you use a texture, and you tend to use it a lot, always remember to favorite it. Okay, notice in my favorites, I've favorited a bunch of textures that I want to use. I want to make sure to do that. So favorite all the textures that you're going to be using. So let's use this sand texture first. We'll set it in the BG layer. Bring the softness all the way up, that's to 1, and bring the opacity down. About 30 or 40 works fine. And what you're doing here is that you want to show that the water is transparent or translucent. And the way that you do that is by making sure that there's a little bit of sand that you can see underneath the water. So let's just start with a larger brush and then just go along the edge like this. This is just your first pass. Okay, this is that first pass. Go along the edge here. You'll be doing more as you go. The second pass, bring it up a little bit more. I'd say around 50 should be fine, and bring the size down. And then just go along that edge to try to break up that line. Because you don't want that hard edge. That looks weird, right? Now, once you've done one side, you want to do the other side too. Notice how the sea foam or the surf right there, you can see some water, but there's no blue. We're going to want to fill that part in too. So if I switch over to the FG layer, and you notice that there's still a hard blue line, if I switch over to FG, and then bring the opacity down a little bit, let's do 38, and then right where there's water, let me make sure that I cover it real quick. 1 second. I want to make sure, let's do BG first, and I'll go all the way along here just so I can hit it. There we go. Get some water. Oopsie, not the sand, my bad. Oh, water, my mistake. There we go. Oops, it's a little too high. Let's go 25%. There we go, perfect. Okay. Just going to go along this ledge right here. And it's also set to the FG layer. There we go. I just want to break up that line. And I'm also going to push some of that water outside of where that wave is or where that surf is. And the reason why is because, hey, that sand is going to be wet. So it's going to be a different color than the drier sand, right? That's a little further up the shore. Let's go ahead and throw that down. There we go. The next one is I love to use snow. Snow is a great texture to use that acts as sea foam or just turbulence in the water in general, what we call white water. So if I type in snow, and you notice there's a snow texture right here, let me just click Inkarnate so I can have them all. There's a couple textures that work really well. Fantasy Regional and Fantasy Battlemap both have these. Parchment, here's one right here. This right here, it's called snow. Snow works fantastic for surf, sea foam, or just turbulence in the water in general. So let me start with the FG layer, and I'm going to follow along with snow just behind where the crest is. Let's actually bring the opacity up a little bit so we can see it better. And you're just adding a little bit of foam along this edge, right? Let's put some here. Let's also put some along this edge. Ooh, I think that's BG, so let's switch over. Here we go. There we go. Nice. We just want some nice foam along that edge. Same thing here. Some foam here. And you can add more too as you want. It's up to you. I'll put it along this edge because I want a lot of that sea foam. It looks nice. There we go. Let's also switch over to the FG, and let's also have some foam just on the beach, so we can have little bit of foam. You know how it is when you walk along the beach and that backwash or that swash comes in and that foam stays on the sand while the water recedes, that backwash. So having a little bit of foam on the shoreline as well is very helpful. So let's put a little bit of foam there. All right, some here, some here. There we go. Looks good. All right, I like it. A little bit of foam. Perfect. Okay, and you can do a transition as much as you want between the water and the land, as long as you get the idea. It's a mix between both. Now, you don't have to make the BG and the FG. You don't have to have both. You could do it all in one layer, but just for the purpose of the video, I'm using the clipping mask because I want to switch over to the river one. All right, now that we know a little bit about how water comes onto the shore, let's talk about how it interacts with cliffs and things like that around us. Let's go back into that coast, and you're going to see, let's go over to water here. One moment. Let's hit that cliff. Okay, so now a cliff is going to interact, water's going to interact with a cliff differently, and it depends on the weather, okay? If you have strong swells, and a swell is basically just a wave, and if that wave is kind of large, it's going to smash up against the cliff face, and it's going to shoot what's called ocean spray or sea spray. And what I've used is just mist stamps or cloud stamps, and then using sparks as well. If you notice carefully, you'll see some white dots. That right there is sparks. Okay, sparks work fantastic as maybe little water droplets. So you can see individual ones on top of the mist. Now, if there's a lot of mist, a lot of mist around your cliff, it usually means because there's some strong winds. The coast generally has strong weather, so I like to throw in that mist so that it looks like when the wave crashes up against the cliff, it's shooting that ocean spray everywhere. And I love when that happens. I'm sure some of you sit there on the beach and you love it when there's some rocks out in the ocean or up close and that sea spray just poosh smashes against the rock. It's really fun to watch. So portraying that, it's not too hard, just using either clouds, mist, and some spark. Now we're also going to use some of our snow texture as well. And I like to show a little bit of turbulence up against the cliff face. So if I just throw this down right here, I can get some nice cliff. A little bit of this stuff just popping out here. So it looks like there's a little bit more. There we go. Nice. Yeah, snow is perfect. It just works so well, at least in my opinion. Yeah, so now you have a little bit of snow here. So it looks like it's crashing up against the thing. Perfect. All right. Well, that pretty much sums up that. Now, obviously, I like to throw in some details and stuff. Let's try making some little bit of details. We'll talk about how to make things underwater and how to do reflection. If it's a kind of a sunny part of the day, I like to use what's called Fey lights. And I think let me type it in real quick. We'll type in Fey. Now, sometimes, reflections can be kind of difficult. And one thing is just the first one, the easiest one is reflecting light. Okay. And with that, all you need to do is just pick a Fey lights that you want. Yellow might work because, the sun is yellow, and just bring the opacity down. You can use white too. It's up to you. But sometimes when you're sitting out on the beach and you see these beads of light or these beads of light spread across the ocean, right? That's the reflection of the sun and the light hitting all those particles. And so sometimes it's nice to throw down some of your Fey lights. You can use yellow if you want, or you can use white Fey lights. Up to you. I don't use snow. I like to use white Fey lights instead, because with its snow, the clusters are kind of weird and uneven. But with this texture, they're kind of more like dots. And that's kind of more what it kind of portrays, or what I see when I'm looking at it. So throw in some of these Fey lights to show some reflection of light in the water. Up to you if you want to use whichever color that you want, yellow, green, whatever color it is. I don't know what the color of your sun is on your world, but it can be whatever you want. But Fey lights work fantastic. Okay, let's go ahead and do some details real quick, just some real quick ones. And I want to talk about how is it you portray something floating on the water, and how do you portray something underneath the water? And we'll do more lessons on this in the river as well. Let me zoom in. The first one is going to be this boat right here, and you'll notice that some of it is above the water and some of it is below the water. Now, these are actually two stamps that have been put together, and they're called or broken boat. And I've used two pieces. The one on top has a normal blend mode, and I used a white shadow. And the reason why I use a white shadow is because it represents the water interacting with the object. And so a white shadow kind of represents an interaction with the object to the water. That second piece below it that's in the water, luminosity blend mode, you drop the contrast, and you'll have to mess with the brightness to change it, because the objective is to make it look like it's underwater. Because there's blue water underneath that stamp, luminosity will force that stamp to conform to that blue color. Okay? And the reason why you drop the contrast is because it's underwater, and your eyes aren't built for looking underwater, right? And so it might seem a little blurry, and it might be that you can't see a lot of the darker line work. Dropping the contrast removes that darker line work, making it look like it's underwater. So that's really nice. Notice too that I've also put some barrels here, and the barrels also use that same technique. I put a little bit of white shadow to make it look like there's some interaction there. And you can also use some foam or the snow texture and put it around it, because sea foam will collect around an object. So putting a little bit of sea foam around the object also looks kind of nice. Okay, so throwing in some sea foam there on those objects, as well as throwing some sea foam along this object here. And I might have to set it to the BG layer. Let me check. There we go. There we go. A little bit of white, a little bit of snow along this edge. Right there like that. So using textures really, really helps. Now let me just review the process real quick before we move on to rivers. Remember, start with your deep water first. That's that first section. Let's take a step back and look at what we've done. We start with the first section. That's going to be your deep water out here. Then comes your breaker waves. Right here. That's where your breaker waves. Then comes your surf. Right here. Okay? Once you've added on those stamps, Then you can move on to the next step, which is texturing. Remember, and just make sure that you do the blending between the land and the water. And then remember to texture in your surf, your sea foam, and use either texture or a path to make the part where it's the height. Remember we talked about the height? I just took a path, dark blue path, blurred it, and then put it below to show that there's height. Notice how the waves out in the ocean don't have that deep blue path underneath them. It's because they're not being pushed up. The water particles aren't being pushed up by the slope of the shoreline. Okay? All right. I hope that was helpful. Remember, if you want to look for the diagram, you can just clone and edit this map. Remember, it's in the chat. So that's how easy that is. Okay? It's not as complex as you think. Let me go ahead and delete this coastline. We're not using it anymore. And I'm going to repaint the background real quick. And then we'll move on to rivers. There we go. Let me go find the river. I'm going to go ahead and push the river down. There we go. I have to quickly line it up. And we'll move on to the next one. Okay. Let me just make sure that I have it right. I think that looks good. Okay. Now, first step. Remember the first step that we did in the ocean was figuring out the direction or the flow? We got to do the same thing with a river, right? We want to decide the direction in which the water is flowing. I'm going to say it's going down this way. It kind of makes sense. Water flows downhill. It flows down and it goes out to the ocean. So just having it flowing in that direction kind of makes sense to me. Now you can have it flow in any direction you want, but this is just what I'm going to do. Once you've decided that, you need to put down some things that are going to denote or show flow. And you know what? Waves from Fantasy Regional work just fine for that. So if I just click this flow group, you'll see that the flow is here. Now the flow is not enough, right? You want to know, well, wait a minute, I still doesn't tell me what direction that it's going in. The way that you're going to determine direction is actually its interaction with things that are already in the water. There's a couple things that could be in the water. A log sticking out, a rock outcropping. There could be a rock shelf, okay? So let me go ahead and throw down a rock shelf. All right. Now, if you're not sure what a rock shelf is a result of what's called vertical bedding. And it's actually what causes white water in general, but vertical bedding is when alternative bands of soft and hard rock cross the channel and what's called differential erosion occurs. And basically softer rock will erode quicker than the harder rock, causing the riverbed to be uneven, right? So that's what causes your erosion or what causes your white water, okay? Now that rock shelf that I have right there, you notice how the water goes down and then travels further down. You know what works really well? Making a rock shelf is pretty easy. I'll show you how you do it. First thing you're going to want to do is just make the line in where the rock shelf will be. This is just a guide, right? Once you've made that line, start putting down your waterfall stamps and just make them nice and small because this is not a waterfall. This is a rock shelf, okay? Once you've done that, you can throw in some rocks that are popping out of the water. And then from there, you can take these ocean kind of ship waves right here and then place them underneath the rock and then going in the direction that you want. So if the river was flowing up instead of down, and by up, I mean just the direction, not actual up. Water doesn't flow up. But then you would have these little stamps right here facing the other way. You'd rotate them and have them be facing that way. Going that way. Because what we're trying to do is to show direction. How is it that I portray that the water is flowing in this direction? Remember, it's interaction with objects in the water are what are going to cause that to happen. Because when the water hits up against something, it creates just turbulence, right? And so because there's something in the way, it leaves this trail. So those stamps are perfect for showing that. And what's really cool about rock shelves is once you've made one, you can copy and paste it, group it, and then you can make a couple more if you want. It's up to you. You can have as many rock shelves as you want. Just be sure that after you've placed the other rock shelf, after you copy and paste it, move the rocks that are inside the rock shelf, the ones popping out, change them a little bit, because you don't want to have the exact same rock formations in your rock shelf. Otherwise, it's just going to look really weird, right? Because there isn't a lot of symmetry visible in that way in nature, maybe on a molecular level, but certainly not from visible with the human eye, okay? Now, we want to show more direction and things like that. So let's throw down maybe a rock outcropping. And an outcropping is just where rock protrudes out of the land or can protrude out of the water. And it's an excellent place to show some more disturbance, more turbulence. And so you have this rock right here, and it's got some logs on top of it. Notice I did that same thing. I put a white shadow, and I actually used a path because I only wanted the parts that were on top of the water to have that white shadow, so I used a path. But in between the shoreline and where the rock is, I put in a waterfall here, right? And then I used waves to kind of show the direction of the flow, okay? Now, whenever you put something in the water or on top of the water, don't forget to use that white shadow trick. If half of it's on the water, half of it's on land, just use a white path, okay? All right. What about things that are underneath the water, right? And we talked about this. Let's go over it in a little bit more detail here. Let's say that you want some stuff to be under the water, right? Just like we did in that shore scene. I took some cliffs because I wanted to show that there was a U shape instead of just a flat rock just going down. In reality, the river will be in a little bit of a U shape, okay? Where a bend comes into play, or where your meandering is, a bend, it's a little bit different, but I don't want to talk about the entire science behind it because we just have a limited amount of time. But if you want to show something underwater like these cliffs, remember, luminosity blend mode, change the contrast, and you'll have to adjust that. Brightness setting so that it's the right setting. Notice that I also have some rocks underneath the water, some logs that are underneath the water. Notice that there are some fish playing under the water over here. And if you go further down, there's some more stuff that's under the water, okay? I put more cliff stuff under the water here. I even you can notice that this outcropping, this rock right here, I put that same rock and then changed the blend mode to luminosity so it makes it look like you can see some of it underwater. So very helpful to do that. The next one is, what about having stuff that's on top of the water? So I'll throw in some more stuff on top of the water. Notice that let's say you have a floating log in the water. Remember, I added a little bit of a path, or added that white shadow to make it look like it's interacting with the water. And I put it on top of a wave stamp that I used for flow. While if you notice carefully that I put the underwater stuff beneath the wave, right? Because the surface of the water is further up, obviously, than those logs that are underneath the water. And to portray that, you just need to do layering. So stuff under the water, put underneath those waves. Stuff on top of the water, put on top of the waves. And you can throw in something dynamic and interesting. Whenever you're making a battle map, you want to have some kind of objective or something. So I put a little bird right there, a carrier pigeon, with a message on top of it, but you can do whatever you want. Maybe there's a sword stuck in a log. Maybe there's something underneath the water, a chest that you have to retrieve. Maybe there's a bridge that you want to put across here. Whatever it is that you want, always throw in some kind of fantastical element that makes it more interesting and that gives your players kind of a goal. Now, let's talk about half submerged stuff. Okay, half submerged stuff, because you're wondering, well, how is it that I portray stuff that's half in the water and half out of the water? Okay. The way that I've gone about this, it's pretty easy. There are a couple methods that you can do it. With this log right here, there are actually two stamps here, two logs. There's one log, which has a normal blend mode, and then I put a longer log, put it underneath, and then change the blend mode to luminosity. Did the same stuff. And to show the interaction, or to hide some of the line work where the log connects with the water, I put a white path. So that means it's interacting, or the water's hitting up against it. So that's one method, okay? Now that might not work with everything that you want to show half submerged and half above the water. That might not work for everyone. So there are some other ways. There's also a flattening technique. Let's say that you wanted to have half of this log right here, half above the water and half below the water. So I would just go ahead and you're going to take two of these logs, copy and paste. You're going to take this log, select it, and you're going to say flatten to FG layer. So flatten to FG layer. There's half of it there. Actually, and I'm going to, let me change this real quick. Undo that. I'm going to do the underwater part first. No, I think it's fine. Let's go back. Let's refresh. Let's go back. That's fine. Let's put this one on top. Oopsie. I got to go back in. Let's go ahead and click. Let's open it up. Take this one. And I'm going to overlap it. Make sure it's right on top. You're going to change that blend mode to luminosity. And remember, you're going to change that contrast and stuff. So let's change the contrast. Let's change the brightness. I want it to be a little darker. Bring the contrast down a little bit more. And then with that blue one, just go to flatten to BG. Okay, so now you have half under the water, half above, and you can always use a white path again to show the interaction. So let me just throw down a white path here, change it to a blur, change the opacity, and change the width just a little bit. Make sure that it's above here, and I'm just going to go ahead and put a little bit of white along here. In fact, it can go all along the shore here if you want to make it look like it's interacting with the water there. Okay. There we go. So two methods of going about showing something half submerged. So one above, one below the water. You can do flattening techniques if you wish. Or you can, if it's not completely on the land, you can do it this way where you use two stamps and just stack them on top of each other. Okay. All right, so the last thing that we need, there are a couple more things actually. Let's touch base on a couple more things. Let's talk about what happens if you want like an object. Let's say that you want this tree right here to reflect inside of the water. Cool trick. We can go ahead and take that same tree stamp. So let's go into that catalog, type in tree. Make sure you're using that same stamp that you're using, okay? Let me go ahead and turn the object. I don't need that on. Let's make sure it's the same stamp. I think this is the right one. It kind of looks like it. Let me check just to verify. Yeah, I think that's it. That'll work just fine. Let's go ahead and make sure that it's scaled up right. I'm going to go ahead and put it a little bit in the water, like this. And I'm going to change the opacity. There's a reflection on the water. I mean, unless the water's really, really still, it's up to you how you want to go about it. But for me, I'm going to do it this way. Once it's in the position that you want it, then you're just going to do just like you did with the half submerged stuff, just flatten it to the BG layer. So now you have a reflection in the water. And I can do the same thing over here if I want. Just go ahead and make this nice and big. Place it right here. Okay, and then just flatten it to the BG layer. There you go. Perfect. Now you have some reflections in the water. Very, very helpful. Let's go ahead and do our texturing, okay? Because the texturing is super important. Just like before, remember we're going to use that snow texture, works wonders. So let's go ahead and use that. Remember to bring your opacity down just a little bit. I don't want too much. 47 should be enough. Softness all the way up. Set it to BG where your water is. I'm going to put it very clearly where the rapids are right here clearly. A little bit there. Let's put some along the ledge as well where it's interacting. Let's also put it along here wherever there's contact with something between land and the water. Let's put some a little bit here as well because there are also particles and some foam that can collect. Let's put some here as well, along here, and we're going to put it all along that ledge too, all along this ledge. And of course, wherever there's your rock shelf, let's put it all along that rock shelf there. Let me go ahead and zoom out real quick. Let's put it along this ledge here, all along this ledge, all along here. Let's also put it wherever this little bit of this is here. Let's go ahead and take a step back and take a look. Let's bring the opacity down and change the size. And let's make some striations. So let's create more flow by taking this texture and following along those waves. So let's connect some of these waves like this. Oopsie, that's too much straight. Let's add in a little bit more opacity, or a little less, a little bit more actually. 30 should be enough. And just slowly kind of create some flow. All right, here we go. All right, nice. That looks good to me. All right. There we go. Some more flow. I like that. More flow. That's better. Okay. And just like before, you can also use reflections on the water using phthalites if you wish. That's up to you. I can just throw down some phthalites here into here. I can throw them down in here a little bit. There we go. All right, that looks nice. A little bit of reflection. I can, if you want it to make it a little bit more opacity, you can. So let's click, make it a little bit harder. There you go. All right. I think that looks good. All right. Ooh, that ended a lot quicker than I thought, actually. So that actually turned out nice. Now remember, if you really want to show that how dynamic water is, it's in relation to the land. So whatever you're making, just remember that water is going to interact with land. So showing when water comes into contact with a shoreline, when it comes in contact with rocks that might be in the water, sea foam or river foam, whenever using shadows or using a path tool to show a white section that kind of interacts with the water, all of those things you can do. The other thing is that you want to portray some depth in the water. And, well, yeah, I forgot to mention this. Same thing in the ocean part. Take that same blue texture that you used for the water and bring the brightness down so it's a little bit darker. If you want to portray depth, remember, it's harder, the deeper the water is, the longer it takes or the harder it is for light to get through to the deeper parts. So take that darker texture and put it wherever you want the water to be deeper. So let's just say the water is deeper kind of in the center. That kind of makes sense, right? Now, if it's a bend, then if there's a bend, the deeper part of the bend, which is generally the outside of the bend. So if it's going this way, like this, it's going like this. This is going to be the deeper end. This is going to be the shallower end right here. Okay? Actually, I think that's correct. Maybe I'm wrong. Shoot, I got to check. But usually, and I forgot which side it is, but you can go and take that darker texture and just put it along the bend like this to represent that this part is deeper, okay? Or you can put it on this side to make it deeper on this side, right? Or you can put it down in the center to show that that's deeper. So the trick to depth in water is just making it use that same texture, make it darker, and then start applying it. And you can do multiple strokes. Let's say I want it to be even deeper right here in these sections. You can totally do that, okay? So just contrast is how you show depth. That's the trick. I'm going to make it to where it's a little bit darker along this edge, so it's deeper on this ledge here. And I'm going to have a deeper edge here. Yes, the outside bend should be deeper. Ah, thank you. Thank you. So this is the outside bend. So we'll put it here. Here's the outside bend, a little bit deeper here, and we'll make it a little bit deeper here. Thank you, by the way, for correcting me. I appreciate that. Awesome. There you go. So that's it. Just remember to use, to change change the brightness of the texture so that way you can show that depth. All right. Well, hey, now you can also show some other things too. You can use you can use filters as well if you should desire, because you can use I think some paper tear has a lot of white particles on it. Notice there's that white particle right there. Let me turn it off so you can see it. Now you can kind of see that. And you can flatten it to the BG. So if I just click this, flatten to BG. Oops. Oh, wait. I don't think that's right, actually. Oh, yeah, it did. Oopsie. Let me undo that real quick. My mistake. Let me take a look here. Oh, yeah. Yeah, just use your paper tear. Paper tear works fine. It might show a little bit on the land as well, that white, but I think it pops out more because there's so much information on the land, all the various textures, but that paper tear filter pops up more on the water because there's not a lot of different texturing going on in the water. So paper tear works really well. And let me see, I think there's some other ones that work really well. No, let me see. I think, no, I don't think snow. I think just paper tear really kind of works the best. If you want to show some extra, if you don't want to texture, put so much texture down, just use that paper tear filter. All right, well, we even have time to spare, 14 minutes till. Awesome. Well, hey, that's it. It's as simple as it goes, just following the steps. Remember what we did in that first one. Remember to follow that chart, deep water, breaking waves, swash, backwash, and your surf. That one, if you know those dynamics, it'll be so much easier to portray it onto the canvas. And when it comes to rivers, just want to focus on what is the flow direction, and the way that direction will be portrayed is by its interaction with the objects that are both in the water, below the water, things like that. So remember, I used those kind of wake stamps to kind of show that it's creating a little bit of wake because the ocean, or the river water is hitting up against those rocks. And so it's creating a little bit of a wake as it goes down. So using those wake stamps is really, really, really helpful. And remember to always use snow. The snow texture works perfect for both sea foam, or if you want to show turbulence, white water, anything like that. That's very, 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 very helpful. Now, please let me know in the chat if you want to see more realistic water tutorials, because there's a lot of different biomes with different types of water, by the way. There's mangroves, there's lakes, there's swamps, lots of different biomes, ponds, lakes, you name it. So if this is something that you like, if you want to do another realistic, we can make this a stream series. This can be part 1, and we can do a part 2, and we can maybe do that next month. And I personally love mangroves and lakes, so maybe we'll do that. So let me know if that's something that you want to see. If you're watching on YouTube, please let us know in the comments, okay? All right, well, that concludes the stream. Thank you, everyone who joined us. Thank you so much for also sharing all your knowledge about the flow of water, because I'm learning too. This is a learning experience for all of us. So please don't be afraid to share. Don't be afraid to correct me. I'm not a professional on that. I just know how to do the art part. When it comes to science, I'm still learning, and I'm very happy to learn from all of you, okay? Hey, that concludes the stream. I think next week is going to be how to create ambushes, and we're going to be doing a couple ambushes with the Fantasy Battlemap style, probably a couple standard ones, your standard ambush at a camp, or an ambush on a road, or an ambush in a back alley in a city or a town. All of those are pretty generic ambushes. At least in my opinion, a lot of them are generally on roads. So we'll be covering those ambushes for Fantasy Battlemaps because, hey, it's a trope, right? You gotta have an ambush somewhere in your campaign. It's just so much fun. And then our last stream of the month is going to be how to create water mills. Really excited about that one. And I'll show you some history and some diagrams, just like we've been doing in the last couple streams, on how that all works, okay? Now, if you yourself want to make suggestions for stream requests, feel free to join our Discord server. When you join the Discord server, make sure that you absolutely go to the roles channel and get your Inkarnate role. Then you'll be able to see all the other channels in the server. Go look for stream requests. Make sure that you go through the stream request list and make sure that whatever you're requesting hasn't already been requested. Give it a thumbs up so that way more likely it will happen, okay? Because I go through there and I delete all the streams that we've already done as well. So it's not some massive list that never gets cleaned up. So make sure that you let me know what you want to see in future streams, because I listen and I will absolutely make sure that we cover those. So remember, request the stream, get people to give it a thumbs up. The more thumbs up, the more likely I will do the stream. All right, that concludes it. Thank you everyone for watching. I had a great time. If you missed any of it, you can always go back and watch more of it. And of course, I always put these on YouTube, all right? Hey, thank you so much for everyone for making it. Merry map making. Please stay safe and healthy, and I will see you all next week, Wednesday, 3 p.m. PST, for another awesome stream. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you all later. Auf Wiedersehen.